And Wayne just stopped him in his tracks and said, "Can I just stop you there, my friend?" Which, to hear Wayne Dyer call somebody in the room my friend was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
And he said, "Do not label yourself." He said, "You are not your label." This person had rung me and was really upset because they'd been involved for a long time. And how can they do that? It was really hard, and I did feel like I needed to get out for my sanity as much as anything else. Yeah. And I challenged her on it because the statistics were heavily weighted against it being women that were abused and men that were abusers. Yeah. But I can change the way I look at this situation. I can change the way I think about this situation. Mm-hmm.
Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Drake, Michigan podcast. We're lucky to be joined today by the wonderful Karen Martyniuk. She's a community activist as well as many other things. And we're going to jump straight in there with a story of how she got involved with community activist and all the work involved. But then we're going to delve a little bit deeper into all her other stories, what she can share with us. Welcome, Karen.
Hi there. Thank you for asking.
Is that okay for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, we try to build people up.
Yeah. Well, then knock them down.
No. We don't do that here.
So I started with my children, basically, and a lot of people have come to me over the years with different ideas and said, "Oh, can you help us do this? Can you help us do that?" So I'd started attending it was called a 4-week How Children Learn Through Play or something, and I found it totally fascinating. But somebody heard about it in the community and said, "You've done this course, will you set up a toddler group?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not so sure about that." And she said, "Well, we need one," because at the time her daughter had spina bifida. Okay. And we're talking about nearly 40 years ago. Right. There wasn't many places where you could just go with a child that was quite, special needs. And she wanted to just feel normal and not have to go to a specific one just for special needs children. So obviously touched my heartstrings. Yeah. And I said, "Well, I'll give it a go. I've never set anything like this up, but yeah, I'll go and ask some questions and speak to some people." And that was one of the reasons. She said, "Well, I've come to you because I know you're really good at talking to people." So I just spoke to people in the community and said, "Is there a venue? Where can we get funding?" All that kind of thing. And before I knew it, I think within 6 months probably, we'd set up a toddler group in the back of the local church, which wasn't ideal. But it worked for a while, and then we were given a new room in the back of the local primary school, and that was called St Mary's Toddler Group in Bamber Bridge, and it went for several years. And obviously I moved on and grew away, but we'd set up a kind of organised committee and everything.
Oh, so did you set it all up and then you come away from it and it carried on?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And but while I was there, I also felt inspired to go and do some training to be like a playgroup supervisor, if you will, because I thought, well, I've loved doing this. I think I'd like to go and work in a playgroup, as they were then. They weren't nurseries. And so I went off and did my training, and then people kept coming to me from the toddler group and saying, will you set up a playgroup? And I was like, give me a break. I just wanted to go and work somewhere. I didn't want to set one up. But then they started to kind of really tug at my heartstrings, because they were saying most of the nurseries in playgroups they were in those days, because you just took them for 2 or 3 days a week, or 2 or 3 mornings, or 2 or 3 afternoons, and paid a couple of quid. It wasn't like it is now, where it's kind of really commercialised and what have you. And a lot of them were businesses, but there was a few that were run by families, parents, what have you. So, but people were coming to me and saying, my child's just settling in at this playgroup, but they're telling me I've got to go and leave them. And my child's crying and I'm upset. And I'm thinking, sometimes children need a bit longer. Not everybody's happy to just see mum disappear, And so I thought, we need one where the parents are involved, where they can stay if they want to stay, go if they want to go. Everybody's got different needs, haven't they? So, we then ended up setting it up. So we just called a group of women together who were all interested, and we all agreed to chip, 10 quid in, I think, each to buy some equipment and that. Managed to have a phone call with the local vicar to ask if we could use a big church hall. And he said, if you can get a letter to me by tomorrow, I think it was tomorrow night or tonight even, we've got a committee meeting. Right. And otherwise the next one will be like 2 months or something.
Committee meetings always take ages, don't they?
Do you know? But and we didn't even have like computers like we do now. It was literally a typewriter. So I kind of knocked this letter up, ran round with it, gave it him, got it in there 5 minutes before this meeting started. Phone call the next day to say, yes, you can have the room for, I think we got it for free for 6 months or something. And then it was like, ooh, here we go. We've got to do this now. So we set that up, and that was called Noahs Ark Playgroup.
I drive past it. I think, is it still?
Well, it's a toddler group now, because obviously nurseries took off really big, and you had to do 5 days a week. And so if you're in a community venue, there's no chance, because there's other stuff going on at the same, at different times. So, but we started it. It was called Noahs Ark Playgroup, and then eventually it became a nursery and registered as a charity and everything. And again, something else I moved away from.
So you like to come in and set up,
and then bugger off.
Are you a Sagittarius by any chance?
No, I'm a Virgo. That's even worse, because everything has to be just right. But interestingly, with that one as well, a couple of years later, because while I was there, that's when I ended up separating from my husband and going to live in a women's refuge for 6 months. But after a couple of years, I can't remember, I get a phone call from somebody about the Noahs Ark, to say that somebody had just kind of gone in one day and said, right, it's not Noahs Ark anymore, it's, I'll probably not say the name of it just to cover people's backs, but I've bought it, and here's your new T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. And this person had rung me and was really upset because they'd been involved for a long time, and how can they do that? And I said, well, they can't do that. It's a charity. It's a registered charity. You've got to close the charity down legally, and you can sell stuff off, but then that money has to be then donated to another charity. And so I was really shocked, contacted the Charity Commission, weren't interested at all.
Really?
Shockingly. And I've heard that story so many times.
Right.
Managed to contact the local CVS, and they did give some support. Managed to contact the local preschool playgroup association, they gave some support, but ultimately decided, because I don't know if you know a lot about constitutions, they're a real pain in the butt, but if the shit's hitting the fan with an organisation, the constitution is what you need to kind of issue rules and regulations, and it's what helps to protect you in times of crisis. So we looked at that, realised that what we needed to do was call an emergency meeting, let all the parents know, get them there, tell them what's going on and everything, which we did. And I typed up a letter, because by this time I'm kind of quite a bit distant, so a lot of people didn't know who I was, but I wrote a letter saying, as the only parent-led playgroup in the area, you should be very proud as parents that your children are coming here, you've got a say in how things go, you've got a say in the management, blah blah blah. And so I put this lovely letter together, and then me and my mum went and passed this letter around to all the people at the meeting before it got started, and there was a bit of a buzz started then, because they didn't obviously realise that, and we explained how long it had been started, who it had been started by, and all the rest of it. And that no way should it just be sold to somebody or be allowed to buy it. So anyway, the meeting started, and it was obviously this lady who had said she'd bought it, and she was saying, well, we care about the kids, and that's why we've had to do this, because nobody was coming to meetings, and so a few parents were standing up saying, well, we never knew there were any meetings, and because it's amazing how people can control things when they want to, can't they? So anyway, slowly but surely, parents were kind of really getting a bit fired up by this time and saying, well, we want it to stay how it is, and we've loved our children coming here, and the benefits and blah, 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 and parental involvement and what have you. And so eventually these people just said, well, we're resigning. We're leaving.
Right.
And said they were walking out, leaving only one member of staff, at which some of the parents were shouting, but I thought you said you cared about the kids. Clearly you don't, because you're just leaving and walking out the door. Anyway, again, they all rallied together in good community spirit, and they pulled together as a team, and their parents stepped in to help out while they developed new people, and it kind of built itself back up again. Unfortunately, when the nursery thing came in, you've got to be able to offer
different then, isn't
10
it?
sessions a week, and so it kind of then reverted to be a toddler group.
Right.
And but yeah, still been going for
it's
a long
funny how
time.
you see the evolution of what started for the right reasons and all about looking after the kids, how it quickly gets commercialised, turned into red tape so you can't do anything, turned into a money making cesspit.
Isn't it weird, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you
But
just
it's like
see everything. Everything.
It's just mad.
And it's all. I mean, but it's always built from the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you know what? Because this is what they say we're going to go back to, don't they?
Absolutely.
Community-led councils and areas.
And this is why we need to know how to kind of deal with stuff when anything does hit the fan, because I hate constitutions. They really are a bugbear of mine. But it's a piece of paper at the end of the day, like, you know, your articles of association if you're a company and all of it. Every organisation's got its own kind of set of rules, but kind of constitution stuff. Apart from the government. British government hasn't got one, but
well, that's another conversation.
But we could do with one.
We have plenty.
But it is a really crucial document, and for any organisation that's going through any difficult time, get that document out. And it's amazing how many people can be involved in an organisation and don't even know about the constitution. One of the things I always say is, if you're getting involved with a group, find out, ask for a copy of it. You've got every right to. And then at least you know whether you should have monthly meetings, whether you should have minutes of a meeting, how long you should be told in advance of the meeting, and all that kind of thing. Yeah. Because people can manipulate it if the wrong people get involved and all the rest of it. So we did manage to save that one, and it was really good.
And it's funny though as well, we're talking about people manipulating, even at that level. People are coming in to manipulate, and it's like, where do these people have the intention to do that?
It's like any organisation or structure, you do need structure. You do need a template.
Oh, yeah.
The only trouble is, I think over time, whichever level of people are like greed or they want power, or you always get people who want to tread on other people because they want to be in control, and they're always jealous of the person who's above them, or they think, oh, I could do that, and then it's only when they're in that position they think, oh, I didn't realise they did that much, and we sort of do it to ourselves, but it always comes like, I think most people start anything off from the right place with the right intentions. And then there's just this tipping point where
see, even politicians, I'm sure.
No, do you know what?
Go into it with the right intentions.
Let's do it.
I believe they all go in with the right intentions. They would have started off at the local parish councils, standing up for, like, you're a good speaker. Like, so if people in your area would have said, Karen, stand up for the local Clayton and whatever.
It did happen as well.
There we go. Because, and then the thing is, so then you get carried away with that, and you're doing it for all the right reasons. And then what happens is, let's say you got invited down to Westminster, or you'd just been elected as your local MP. I dare say at some point then someone takes you into another room and offers you a cigar and says,
here's a brown paper envelope, Karen.
Karen,
with Sam Allardyce written on it.
Karen, you've been fighting for all these lovely things, saving your local nursery.
We don't like the nursery anymore.
But I'm being serious and all that, because what would happen then is you might be fighting for your local area for a local nursery, and then someone else will say to you, the only trouble is we've got this company who want to build an A road straight through that nursery.
That's the way it goes, isn't it?
And there's that much money involved, and you'll be going, oh no, but the children, and they go, listen, Karen, we'll make it worth your while. We'll buy you that new little bungalow. And before
this is where you sell your soul.
And that is the whole thing, isn't it? But the thing is as well, you know yourself, if you would have said, no, I'm going to stick to my principles, it's all about, then what happens is, it's, Karen can't be a MP anymore, or whatever. Something would happen, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
and then if you really stuck to your guns, that's when little accidents happen.
And we'll not go there either.
But you can understand that. Let's be honest, that is what will happen.
That's what happens.
But to be fair, the opposite actually happened for me, because I was enticed, I suppose you might want to say, to become a member of a political party and stand for election, and I did, and I campaigned, and it's very tiring, I have to say. So. Every credit to anybody that stands for election, because you've got to put the legwork in, you know.
Yeah.
But I realised pretty soon on that even if because I did stand a couple of times, didn't get in, but realised that actually all that time and effort I was actually putting into my community, because by this time I was running a community drop-in centre on Clayton Brook, and it took a lot of time, a lot of energy, sometimes doing 60, 70 hours a week. But if I'd have then got onto the council, I would have been having to be representing the whole of my area and in Chorley, not at the coalface. And what I wanted to do was be at the coalface and help people and fill forms in and give them a bit of, a listening ear or whatever. And you can't really do that the same when you're kind of operating for a bigger organisation. So I decided that I wasn't going to stand anymore on that basis. So no matter how much they would have offered me, it still wouldn't have been worth it.
Yeah.
Because my heart was with the people. Yeah. And I think that's also another sad thing, that often people, no matter what walk of life it is, you go into something because you've got a passion for something, a real deep passion, whether it's working with children, whether it's working with old people. And the only way you can progress in most of those jobs is to become a manager. And you lose what you went into it for in the first place. I've seen so many excellent teachers or excellent youth workers or, nurses or whatever, and they go for the money, go for the position, because that's what you're taught in this society to go for, and the prestige and all the rest of it. And then actually they end up feeling depressed because they might be earning a lot more money.
Taking away from the actual true path,
but what they want and what,
there's quite a lot to take from people who are in a job and they have I don't want to say no ambition, because that's the wrong word, because the thing is, if you're happy,
absolutely,
if you're a primary school teacher and love teaching children, and you have no in your thoughts to be a manager, because that's what you have to take your hat off to people who say,
I'm happy with this,
I love this,
I love this. I agree.
I mean, unfortunately what happens is then others spoil that for you. They come in and, you can't do that anymore, you can't do this, do you know what I mean? No, wouldn't it be nice? Be better in my building company. It'd be great if everybody just said, "I just want to be." I just want to be a brickie. I just want to be a joiner.
And do the best at that role.
Absolutely.
What a great world that would be.
Have you always had that passion to help people? Then has that come from an early age?
Yeah, because even when I was really little, I remember, and whether it was because I brought up a good Catholic girl, we do
love a good Catholic girl.
Frank Zappa's got a song called Catholic Girl.
But and you were encouraged to do good things for other people and raise money. And I remember my mum not making me, but I was given her a basket set for you weaved paper around it, and then we sold them and made money and sent it to the poor children or wherever they were. And I remember getting a real sense of satisfaction doing the creative stuff, but also knowing that I was making them and giving them away to other people. And I do think a lot of people actually love that. You love the satisfaction of either knowing you've done a good job, knowing that you've helped someone who might have really been struggling, and know that they might have moved their life on a little bit. And that's why when we set up the community house and the food co-op and what have you on Clayton Brook, just knowing that you took somebody from one step to the next rung. And it didn't matter if they went 3 rungs up and then dropped back. As long as you were helping them to keep progressing, then to me that was just kind of like...
See that side of life is pure heart. That's the great side. You can feel that sense of purpose. It's when you get to see the other side, the corruption and the food baskets that you made and for the poor children, when you found out they were probably locked up at the back of the vicar's house. What's going on? But then that's when it all gets ruined, isn't it? That's when you see that side of life. Then but like I said, people start off with the good intentions and good feelings. I just want to help people. I just want to be a good person. And then it's outside influences that always ruin that.
They need to stop these.
No, they don't have to.
No, and I'm a great believer in what you put out, you get back. And I think if you keep focusing on the good,
where energy goes and energy flows.
And I think I've had some shit situations happen in my life, but I've always been able to step back, given a bit of time, and reflect and say, well, actually, that's taught me a heck of a lot that I would have never learned from it. Never would have learned it. And if you all look back on your lives, we learn the most from the worst stuff.
No, that is true.
Well, do
You know
you
what I
mind? Do you mind if we go backwards then to because about the worst stuff? You said before that you ended up in a
women's refuge.
Yeah. So that was from divorce, was it?
It was, I left my husband because of domestic abuse.
Right.
And it wasn't overly physical. You know, I would never say that, even when we were going for the divorce and the house and all that lot. My solicitor was trying to persuade me to say that he'd hit me, and I was like, but I can't say that. Because he hasn't. He's thrown me around the room. He's done all sorts of other stuff. Mentally, you know, as much as anything.
Well, so you've been
but it was really hard, and I did feel like I needed to get out for my sanity as much as anything else.
Yeah.
So I did end up in a women's refuge, and I felt a bit awful at the beginning because I thought I was taking up a place that somebody who was being battered might have needed, you know what I mean? But I remember one of the ladies who had been battered close to death, and she said, do you know, I feel more sorry for people like you. And I was like, why? She said, because you can't go, look at my bruises, look at this, look at what he's done to me. She said, yours is more psychological and mental. She said, and those scars stay for a long, long time. And I thought, gosh, that's the first time anybody's ever really got how difficult it can be. And I think for anybody out there who is kind of suffering domestic abuse, you don't always realise how important it is to just kind of take that step and get away and move forward, you know, because it not only affects your life, your confidence and everything else, but it affects your children's, and you don't always, you know, at the time you think you're protecting your children from stuff, but you don't realise that.
So you go through a period of denial as well, don't you?
Absolutely.
And then did it take you a while? Then did you know for a while that you needed to leave?
Yeah, I did. I'd seen things on television and seen helplines and stuff like that, and thought, I really need to ring somebody, I need to get some help or whatever. But every time I did think about it, I just kept thinking, well, I'm not as bad as everybody else. Other people deserve it more than me and need it more than me. Yeah. And when it happened, it was just one of them out of the blue things. A massive row blew up, and I just,
a trigger moment.
Yeah. So I left, and I didn't get in a women's refuge straight away. It took a couple of attempts of speaking to different people and everything, because I didn't even really know that I would be allowed, because we owned our own house as well, which is it's a difficult situation. But I did get in. I was in there for 6 months, and again, even in that situation, I've known people be in a women's refuge and find it horrible, depressing, all the rest of it. I just made the best of it. Yeah. I was trying to encourage women to cook together, to kind of act like a community. I was getting information leaflets for the wall, because I was doing youth work at the time, and helpline numbers and all sorts of stuff, because it wasn't a very well supported refuge at the time. And then ended up having conversations with people who knew people in the town hall, and they kind of managed to get some shifts and some changes in there. So by the time I left after 6 months, within a couple of months it had actually closed down, and I felt awful, because I thought, that's because some of the conversations I've had. But they closed it down to reopen it with a member of staff fully appointed.
So you'd made the right impression.
Hopefully I'd sown a seed, and they got a play therapist, because again, that was one of the things I was saying. Some of the women that were going in the refuge had been in 2 or 3 other ones, because nothing was changing. They weren't getting any support. They weren't being able to look at how, because I will openly say, there will have been times that I would have, I'm not excusing abuse, but sometimes it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, and it can get
out of control,
and you can put up with stuff that you wouldn't normally put up with, because again, good Catholic girl, keep your head down, don't say anything, stay married, all that lot.
It's quite a big subject, actually, because first of all, obviously, when you think of a refuge, obviously you think, I need somewhere to live or stay. But obviously, if you're coming from a place of abuse, domestic abuse, physical, whatever, there has to be an element of education as well, and a support network. Absolutely. And counselling for the women to realise.
Not just. No,
well, I suppose. Yeah, sorry, I apologise there, because it is both. But I can understand.
But I mean, I get so fed up with people just talking about the perpetrator, and whether you're a man or a woman in a domestic abuse situation, whether it's the female abusing a male or a male abusing a female. both need support.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just going to keep repeating the same
True,
patterns.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So for men, if they are the abuser, and it doesn't always happen, it is
Yeah.
often women that can do it as well. But they will need support. They're hurt people that are hurting people.
Yeah.
And obviously
Repeating
at the
those
time,
cycles.
yeah. And I mean, even when I was going through it, I knew that there was issues. I was trying to see if I could offer support. I even asked if we could go for counselling, but he didn't seem to think it was important enough. And so, you know, that you can see sometimes in a relationship things are going wrong and you don't know where to go for help. And if people were more open and honest about it and acknowledged that, you know, my husband needed as much support as I did to be able to help him not carry on that situation in another relationship, you know, or with his children, because his children don't really have much to do with him. And it's a shame, and that breaks my heart, because I had a lovely relationship with my dad. And I think, you know, most children don't want, you know, for whatever type of abuse you're going through, they want the abuse to stop, but they don't want the relationship to end.
It's very difficult, isn't it? Because what you're saying is 100% correct there. But like from your ex-husband's point of view there, it's like, unless he wants to change or he wants the help, it's very hard, because obviously there would have been issues from his past that have made him like he was. That can... Sometimes life can happen to you and it's that stressful, you take it out on those closest to you. Like you could have no money, or you're struggling, you're out of work, or you know, a disability, and then suddenly you become very angry. And so there's a million and one reasons. You'd like to think over the years that because of social media and everything else, and people can speak out more, you'd like to think it's better. But I did hear a survey not long back, and it said during like the pandemic, more people were coming, because everyone was at home together. There was a rise in home domestic abuse and all that kind of stuff. So it's still very much a problem in today's society.
Oh yeah, it is massively.
Do you think it's as bad today as back then, or do you think?
I mean, I don't personally have as much contact with people from that point of view to say whether I feel it is or it isn't. One of the things that does strike me though is, and I went to an International Women's Day event a few years ago, and there was a lady there who was running. She was a manager of not a manager, she was a director of a refuge, and like a trustee or something. But she was quoting statistics for domestic abuse, and I challenged her on it, because the statistics were heavily weighted against it being women that were abused and men that were abusers. And because again, even in same-sex relationships, women can abuse women or men can abuse men. You know what I mean? And I said, you know, I do think there is a lot more men. And she said, oh, the statistics for men are very, very low. And I went, yeah, but is that not because men aren't coming forward and saying it? Because it's not like a masculine thing to say, actually, my partner's...
That's what it is.
And I know of people who are in those situations, and it does worry me that gets... you know, overlooked, but also that there aren't, I think there's one, I might be wrong, but I think there might be just one refuge for men.
Right.
And I mean, women's refuges.
So where do men go then?
I've no idea. They don't
go. I think a lot of time as well, this is why you find some people end up on the streets. Because their life quickly spirals.
They end up on a friend's couch and then somewhere.
Well, when I was in the women's refuge, we ended up being invited to like a Christmas play or something, a pantomime. And you won't be able to do it now, but me and the 3 kids were in the back of a van, just jollying around in the back of a van, no seatbelts or anything. And there was a guy there. It was from not the Foster Centre, Fox Street homeless shelter in Preston, and I just said, you know, because I love talking to people and getting their stories, and I said, so if you don't mind me asking, how did you end up homeless, you know? And he went, no, I don't mind telling you. And he said, and he'd been homeless something like 20 years. 20 years. He'd lost his job.
Yeah.
And then he was about to lose his home, right. So then his wife kicked him out because she couldn't, you know, that we're going to lose our home and blah, blah, blah.
Oh.
So, and that was the start of it for him.
Right.
And because once you've not got a postal address as well,
that's right.
You know,
your life can quickly spiral out of control.
And he said, you know, that a few times he tried to kind of get back on his feet, but something had happened. And I just thought, you know, because my grandma used to say this, there but for the grace of God, go you. You know, and I think there's a lot of that, isn't there? You know, sometimes the cards are dealt wrong, or, you know, attracting things in the wrong way because your thinking's not right or whatever. But who knows what might happen tomorrow? If you'd have told me when I first got married that I'd end up splitting up after 12 years or whatever, being in a one bedroom with 3 kids, not a chance. I wouldn't have believed you, because I was going to stay married till the death us do part, come what may. But when you realise that the marriage is dead anyway, and that it isn't healthy, and it isn't, because that was what I was feeling like. My mental health was affected.
It would ruin you, wouldn't it?
And it was, I wasn't the person I knew. You know what I mean?
And a lot of people don't actually ever leave the relationship.
No,
they stick. Because they can't. The fear.
But end up on antidepressants or self-medicating with alcohol or drugs.
Exactly.
You know, and there's so many people. And again, both sides of the
But do you not think a lot of that is because of the fear of they don't know what the other side of life's going to be? So they sort of stick where they are because they're too scared of...
That plays a part. Or they've got kids and they don't want the kids losing.
That's another thing, because back in the day I remember, like, even with, you know, you had conversations where we'll just stay until the kids are 18 before we split up and all that, because we're doing the right thing for the kids.
And what are you putting the kids through in the meantime?
The kids know that you're unhappy, don't they? They pick up on it, don't they?
I have to say though, because after all that, and I kind of got my own place and everything, and moved to not far from where Aunt is now, and I started to realise that there wasn't an awful lot of community activity, and that started to make me think, because I was like, I really don't like this place particularly. It had a bad reputation at the time. There was 50 empty properties. There was a lot of drug dealers, prostitution. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, I was so naive to all this. It was like, wow, what's all this going on outside my front door, literally. And so I remember writing down, you've got 2 choices, girl. You can either stay and change something, or you can move, and where are you going to go? Do you know what I mean? So, and with that, I kind of made a few plans. I was going to set up a babysitting circle, because that was one of the things at the time, and maybe look at setting up a toddler group or something. So I made some notes in a book, and then I started to notice that they were chopping oak trees down around me on the way.
There's loads of lovely trees around
on the way to school, and the boys were saying, "Mum, why are they chopping oak trees down?" I thought they were protected species, because I was a little bit in the environment then, but not as much as I kind of did get to. And I said, yeah, they can't chop oak trees down. And they were like, well, so I went to visit a friend who kind of knows a bit of stuff, and I said, I don't understand why they're chopping these oak trees down. So she bought me one of these portable disposable cameras back in the day, and so she said, take some photographs, we'll get it developed, and then we'll write to the council and find out what's going on. So I started to do that, but in the meantime, and Synchronicity plays a big part in my life. I was doing youth work at the time, and a youth worker had recommended I tune into Radio Lancashire. He said, you like a bit of a debate, don't you? And you like to know what's going on in the world. And I was like, yeah. So I went home that night, tuned into Radio Lancashire for my radio alarm for the next morning. And I kid you not, the very next morning, the radio went off at 7:30. The news was on. There's some young people have set up camp at Cuerden Valley, in Cuerden Valley, at Cuerden Gates Farmhouse. They've squatted this property. They're protesting against the M65 development and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, and they're asking for people to come along and join in and join the campaign. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe that's why they're chopping all these trees down. Oh my gosh, can't believe it. Because years before, probably 20 years before, I'd been asked to sign a petition to say, we don't want this to go through Cuerden Valley, because it's a beautiful part of the world.
It's beautiful, yeah, it is.
And I was like, they're never going to build a motorway through there. It's beautiful. It's a nature reserve. It's part of Lancashire Wildlife Trust. And I'm like, I'm not even signing it because I'm wasting my time. And he went, seriously, they are planning to. So he persuaded me, I signed it. Thought that was it. I thought, yeah, who's ever going to build a motorway there? And then all these things started going. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, maybe this is it. Maybe they really are. So went to said friend who'd give me a disposable camera, and it were Ash Wednesday. So we had to go and get our ashes first before we go trotting off to meet these road protesters. So we go along, both of us in our Sunday best frocks, and we go and we climb over this gate. And we meet everybody, and they're all just ordinary, honest, down-to-earth students from Lancaster University studying kind of the environment and stuff like that. But I'd heard about this motorway being built and kind of decided that they needed to do something about it. So I was in straight away. It's like, oh my gosh, I cannot. But in unfairness, they've had a petition. Surely to goodness, they won't build a road. So I got involved, and I was probably there every single day, I would say, for 6 months or so. A lot of people that know me say, yeah, that's her that climbed up trees. I never climbed up a tree. Jumped in front of quite a few chainsaws.
Get in there, Karen. Get in there.
My sons climbed trees. One of them climbed one of the biggest trees, and I didn't see it photographed for quite a long time, thank goodness.
Wow.
What do we like?
Yeah, there's some monster trees in Kidderminster.
But well, there was a lot more as well. And so as the protests progressed, and bear in mind, I've come out of a kind of family, and I'm meeting a lot of people, and I can say this now because my mother's not here anymore, but my mum stopped speaking to me for about 3 years after I left my husband, and that was really hard.
Yeah, I bet.
And
is that the Catholic thing?
Yeah, well, yeah, part of, I think. But also, I started to realise that family doesn't have to be blood. Because we were gelling as a community, and women that I'd only just recently met on the estate were becoming real strong friends and everything. And because there was always the threat of being arrested, we were always like, right, if we get arrested today, who's looking after my kids? Who's picking my kids up from school?
Wow, I love that.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was all that, and which was a shock to me because I had been brought up a bit middle class and, all of that. But the other side of it, that was a real eye-opener. I was able to talk to people from so many different walks of life. Yeah. And because, again, being brought up a Catholic, I'd been taught that pagans were like devil worshippers, and you kind of like stood well away. And I'm thinking, well, they look like right ordinary folk to me. Maybe I just need to ask a few questions and find out. And then when they were saying, they were into like the moon and the sun and earth and nature, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I've been a pagan all my life, closet pagan, and I didn't even know about it.
The power of knowledge and meeting new people.
Absolutely. Amazing. And just being able to sit down, because we used to quite often have campfires at night and sing songs and people playing penny whistles and stuff, and it opened my children's eyes as well to a lot of different things, and to seeing people being kind to each other, because that was something else, and especially men just being hugging and patting each other's backs and gentle and caring and supportive, and that sense of community. And it massively changed my life. And people talk about light bulb moments or being enlightened, and I don't think being enlightened is a destination. I think it's lots of little journeys, and you might be enlightened about one thing today and something completely different tomorrow, and it might be just about the price of eggs, but you've been enlightened. But that was part of that journey, and to learn from so many different people and so many different cultures and backgrounds, and people you wouldn't perhaps
stepping out that bubble that you've been in.
You wouldn't, even in a pub. And I think this is one of the joys of the smoking stuff in pubs, because once they banned smoking in pubs, people got to talk to other folk. Yeah. Normally you'd have sat in with your mates, you'd have had your cigarette where you were sat, but now people were going outside, talking to strangers. Yeah. God forbid. But you know what I mean? And that's and again, enlightening people, because you're talking to people that you might never have spoken to before, sharing ideas, sharing information, sharing knowledge, and it just kind of sparks
you get that
something.
with even different cultures.
Yeah.
So like I said, if you were brought up Catholic, right, and one of the hardest things people ever have to do is sort of have to look at themselves and think, what if everything I believe
is wrong?
That's one of the, because I always thought, right, one of the biggest lessons, right, people or anybody comes across is when you become into an adult, you at some point you ask the question and you're like, what if my mum and dad were wrong? Yeah. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, I don't know if it's just for everybody, but it was for me. It was like, there's a time when you say, my mum and dad were only human. My mum and dad, what if my mum and dad were not that informed? What if my mum and dad believed everything they were told?
Yeah.
And
agreed,
do you know what I mean? And it's just social programming.
It is conditioning.
And I mean, I was fortunate. I was brought up in a very mixed race area in just out in the Black Country, right? Whereas when I'm come up to Wigan, it was predominantly white, and we spoke about this before. But the thing is, if you've never interacted with other cultures, like and races and faiths, how would you ever?
I know. And how would you even know people were racist? Because I was working at a fantastic place in Preston called Sarah Centre, where they had therapeutic thermal massage beds, and it was the most diverse place I have ever worked in my life, because people were getting a free session. So you were getting, Indians, you were getting people from Pakistan, different religious beliefs, different cultures, people from Poland, from Ukraine, from all over the world, literally. And I would always, because I love accents, so I'd always say, where's that lovely accent from? And then, because rather than say, where do you live, where you come from? And just met so many beautiful people. And the one thing that they all had in common was an issue with the health that they needed sorting, and they was getting it done for free. Yeah. You know, it's a win-win situation, that, isn't it? But it was just so beautiful to see, barriers, and you learnt so much. I mean, most of the time we'd hug someone if they came in. But we'd always go, do you want a hug? Do you know what I mean? And if they didn't, that's fine. But I remember going to sit next to an elderly Muslim, and he was a very well-respected person in his community. He owned a fruit and veg shop and all the rest of it in Preston. And I kind of went to shake his hand, knowing that I wouldn't give him a hug, but I just, because he was like lying on a bed. So I went to shake his hand, and he kind of went like that, and I went, I am so sorry. And I'd forgotten that Muslims don't often shake hands. But years later, he'd come up to me and he'd put his arm on my shoulder, and he was kind of, just being familiar, but not overly familiar. And I was like, oh, that's unusual. It's not usually like him. And then I saw him about a year after I'd left there, and he came straight up to me and gave me a massive hug. And I went, whoa, what's that all about? And I went, you don't do hugs. He went, Karen, you're like family.
Oh, that's
and I was
lovely.
like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. But again, just learning those different things, like, I mean, somebody had once said to me that if you go, if you're invited for a meal at somebody's house, you need to ask, because some of them expect you to eat everything that's on the plate.
That's right.
If they've prepared it for you, some expect you to take your shoes off. But if you don't know all those cultural nuances, you can really offend someone.
And I think, because a lot of time, let's be honest, how often do you get to learn, unless you're in in that field, you don't get to learn about other people's cultures. No. And in fact, most people are brainwashed in the way of whatever you ram down your throat off news about certain cultures, that is your perception.
Absolutely. Yes,
so if all you've seen is thousands of Muslims were chanting and protesting on the street, so now you've got that in your head. Or if it's like when they show you constant crime and it's all to do with, say, black people, and then now you've got this frightened fear, and like if a gang of black people walk past you, and it's all
conditioning.
People don't realise it's done by design.
We can almost condition ourselves, because I remember years ago, again working in community, when I don't know if you remember it, but there was a Montserrat volcano on the island of Montserrat, and it was due to explode and all the rest of it. So a lot of people were moved out of their homes, and because they are British citizens, they were given free passage to come over here to be put up, because their homes, they literally had to move out their own, whether they liked to or not. The scientists apparently were calling the quits. So doesn't that sound familiar? Sorry, did I say that?
Trust the science.
So they trusted the science and left their homes, and the volcano didn't erupt. I don't know if it ever did, but at the time, even when they moved to the UK, it still hadn't erupted. But they'd had to leave everything, every last thing, more or less leave with the stuff you stood up in, and then came to the UK. And I was one of them, a lot of our perceptions were that if one person from the Montserrat does that, then they must all do that. How naive is that in your thinking? But again, you do get conditioned. So, you hear that one of them might be from one specific denomination, and then assume that maybe they all are. And then find out that they're not. Or you find out that they're very heavy-handed because their culture says you have to be strong disciplinarians and all the rest of it. So then you believe that all people from Montserrat are. And then you start to talk to somebody else and actually, no, I would never hit my child. That's not what I believe. And then you're kind of like, whoa, hang on a minute. So what is the right thing? And actually, you can all live in the same community and all believe different things, or have different,
definitely.
Whether you're white, black, green, blue, pink, or whatever, it doesn't matter, because we all follow our own truths. And that might be because of where we've been brought up. It might be because of what our schools taught us, but we all adapt it to our own kind of needs, don't we?
The nice thing is when you come out of the bubble, like you did with the pagans,
absolutely. You see
and then your perceptions are
completely
changing again, and you're opening your consciousness is raising then, because your wisdom and
absolutely. And it was a blessing, And I remember I was on a television programme around the time of the M65 stuff, and the guy that had been the director or producer or whatever rang me afterwards, and he was like, "Thanks a lot," because I'd been like I think they call me the front person or whatever.
Well, yeah, you're a legend, aren't you?
And so he was saying, we'd love you to come and do some more work with us in London and blah blah blah. I said, if you want an idea for a programme, I said, life after divorce.
Right.
I said, because the number of people I've spoken to, both men and women, who have said how their life has gone off in a different tangent completely, because you kind of become almost in this little box, don't you, what expectations there are of being a married person or a mother or whatever. Yeah. And after divorce, you can kind of loosen those shackles and go, hang on a minute, but who am I?
Yeah, what do you want?
What do I want? Yeah. And he was going, come and do it. And was trying to persuade me to go and work in London. And I eventually had to say, I think I rang him back after a couple of days, thank you very much, but I'm going to have to say no. And it was years later before I told anybody. And my reason being was that I'd got 3 children. Yeah. And there was no way I was going to just up sticks or even leave them with somebody. But I didn't have anybody to leave them with, to be fair. But then some of my friends who had met through the M65 were like, we would have done something. We would have juggled it. We would have. I went, well, it's one of them things. Of
course it is.
You don't take the path at the time. But I don't regret it. It's, there's lots of wonderful things happening.
So, when you've sort of obviously... When you're just talking about these episodes, so obviously your mindset would have changed a little bit from obviously being brought up Catholic. Obviously now you've come out of your bubble of marriage and you've got 3 children, and now you found yourself involved in activism and supporting a good cause. Is this the type of time where you sort of would you say you were sort of becoming spiritually awakened yourself? Or
I think, to be fair, I was quite spiritually awakened before that, but in a different kind of way, because being a Catholic, I was talking to the Holy Spirit, and I was having those kind of spiritual moments, and also having some dark things happening as well, because sometimes when you're kind of moving in the light, dark stuff happens. And then when I separated, I remember reading a book called In God's Name, which I would have never, and it's amazing how once your vibration shifts, things come to you differently. Yeah. So I saw this book called In God's Name. I read the back of it, and it was about a journalist who I think was a Catholic, I might be wrong, but he'd been asked by someone to prove that Pope John Paul I had been murdered. And he didn't believe it at all. He totally believed he died of natural causes, because that's what the world had been told. And so he thought, no, I'll take on the project, but only so I can prove that he wasn't murdered. Unfortunately, he couldn't find any evidence to prove that he wasn't murdered, and more evidence to prove that he was. But that blew the lid off the Catholic Church for me, and it really. And I still think Catholicism has its roots, has its purpose, but the structure behind it. Yeah,
I think if you spoke
there's
to
an
anyone,
element of corruption anywhere and everywhere in there.
If you speak to anyone today about the Catholic and the Vatican, it comes with
because the Vatican Bank had bankrupted several countries, small South American countries in particular. I think historically it not necessarily had something to do with the Irish famine, but had the power to resolve the issues and chose not to. But also there was issues around contraception that the new Pope didn't necessarily agree with. Pope John Paul I, and also issues around there were lots of secret societies in the within the Catholic Church, and he didn't agree with that because again it goes against biblical principles. So he was trying to do stuff about that, and so that's why the journalist felt that he possibly would have been murdered, and Digitalis would have been the mode of thing, because he was never given an autopsy or a post-mortem.
But that goes back to our conversation at the start of, you might have started off with the right reasons, and he probably got all the way to the top of being the Pope, and he might have been genuine, but then suddenly it's like, we're not having that.
Absolutely.
And like even modern day now, so people who watch news now, so like there was a thing where Zelensky from Ukraine was meeting the Pope, basically for money, and the Pope and the Vatican was funding both sides of wars, and they have money interests in weapons. Now hold on, how can you be preaching to the public?
Well, I think if you research wars historically, you'll find that nearly every war has gone down the same route, and both sides are being funded.
Exactly.
But the thing is, like as the average person on the street, you do not associate your religious figures with being involved. And this is what I said, when you get woken up and you start going down rabbit holes, I mean, if you went down the rabbit hole of the Vatican, Washington, London, this kind of stuff, you'd be like,
that shows the power of the media, doesn't it? And the bubble they put you in, that's the power that
I'd rather go down a quantum physics rabbit hole.
I know,
great, we love the quantum physics.
Yeah, I do like a bit of quantum physics.
Yeah,
if I'm going to go down any,
let's do that.
So let's just talk a little bit about, so you was already spiritually awakened before what's it called?
And I think it just and added to, because I think reading that book helped me cut some ties and realise that actually there's more to stuff than you first realise, and that the Catholic Church wasn't all that, you know, and I mean structurally, I don't mean the people that I knew and all the rest of it, and then I read another book, and again just found it in
they come to you, don't they?
an attic sale or whatever, and I can't remember what it was called, one of those big, thick, horrible, smelly books, you know, the ones, and it was cultures and something from around the world. So it had about Mesopotamia, the Atlanteans.
No way.
And so I was, and so I was like, whoa, this looks fascinating. And as I'm flicking through it before I bought it, so it was only about 20p, there's all these images that are very similar to what I've just stepped out of from the Catholic Church. And I'm like, and there's stories about this Ark landing on Mount Ararat in a lot of these cultures, and it's like, hang on a minute, I was told that ours was the only one. I was told that ours was the right one, and how can all these different cultures, thousands of miles apart, and all that, you know, because again, you are brainwashed as children at school, aren't you? And the Bible, you know, the Bible has its place, but it does brainwash you a lot. And so I'm reading all that and I'm thinking, whoa, so that was another big eye-opener for me, because it was like, wow, there's more to this than, you know, meets the eye and everything. And then obviously things like, you know, ETs and stuff like that. You know, you think, oh, is there any truth in this? Because my grandma used to be a great one for it. She'd phone me up, she only lived across the road. Karen, come and have a look quick. I can see some UFOs. And my mum would be going, taking a notice of her, and I'd think, hang on a minute, we both saw whatever it was, don't know what it was, but why, just because people tell us there's no such thing as UFOs, should we believe it because we've just seen something? We don't know what it was, definitely wasn't a plane, was flitting backwards and forwards. And so I always kind of take stuff like that and I park it, and I think, well, I don't know enough about it right now, but I'm not going to disregard it out of hand, because there was something in it, definitely something in it. You know, even like the Mesopotamia and the Atlantean stuff, don't know enough about it, park it.
Exactly.
And then sometime further on, something else will come out, I'll add that to that, and I'll file it in a little drawer, and I'll bring it out when I need it. And
it's like a treasure map.
Yeah, you know, and so slowly things. And one of my friends, when I moved to Clayton Brook, one of my neighbours came and lent me a book, and we was only talking about this in a group recently, because it was called Heal Your Life by a lady called Louise Hay.
I love it. Love it.
So
it's a classic for me.
That was my life's trajectory, went on a completely different path.
One of my first books.
And it really opened my eyes to everything, and within a few months of reading that, because she in that decided, people used to say they'd live till 70. because that's what the Bible says. And she thought, hang on a minute, there's quite a lot of evidence to say we can live longer than that, so I'm going to change that. So she decided her end number was going to be 120. She didn't quite get there, bless her, but she
got to a good old age,
got to a good old age. And so when I heard that, I thought, oh, well, I can do that. I'm not having her number, though. I want my own. Yeah. So I waited for a few weeks. And then on the radio, I heard this conversation of somebody who was the oldest known recorded person, had been 153. So I thought, well, that's a good, I'll go for 154. Now, I have tried to Google that since, cannot find it anywhere. Right. So I don't know whether that just was...
Mandela effect.
Somebody fiddling with my radio. But anyway, I set on 154. And at the time, I was 34. So I went from, like, this is my life. I'm going to live to be 70. If I'm 34, I'm here. Yeah. But if I'm going to live to be 154...
You've got a lot of... there's a lot of opportunity there, isn't there?
And I'm like, whoa. And then I started thinking, what have I done in the last 10 years of my life? And I'd set up a toddler group, set up a play group, set up a youth group, set up a,
Yeah.
Well, if I can do that in 10 years, what can I do in the next?
I love that attitude.
That's the right attitude.
And that was awesome for me. And it actually, as well, made me shift completely overnight from feeling that I was middle-aged at 34
to being
a babby.
True.
A babby.
Yeah. It is. It's great.
In the back in the day, how many people thought you finish work... Right, at 65, they were dead by 67.
Yeah.
Literally, that was in your subconscious.
No.
That was in your energy. And now we're living longer and longer.
And when I worked at this place, Sarajam place, I did it as like a session one day, because we used to do lots of talks on health and stuff, and it wasn't all about Sarajam. And so they all came in, and they knew me, and we used to have a laugh. And so I got them all settled, and I'm like, good morning, and talking to different people. I said, right, and I got a flip chart behind me, and I said, right, I'm going to ask you something. I said, I want you to all just tell me, what age do you think you'll be when you're going to die? And they all looked at me and went, oh, you're a right one. Well, thank you for cheering us up, Karen. Yeah, that were great. And I went, no, seriously, come on. I said, there's a story behind this. I'll tell you in a minute why. So one by one, they all said, and some of them were already in the 70s, so they might have said 80 or 75 or whatever. So we wrote all these numbers down, and there was probably about 15, 20 people in the room. And then I totted the total, whatever it was, 300, 400, whatever. And then I told them the story about Louise here. And I said, and that changed my life. I said, I went from thinking I'm halfway through my life to thinking I'm just at the beginning of it and I've got more than the rest of my life ahead of me. And I said, and you know what? I said, just that mental thinking, I said, shifted me from being middle-aged to being no but a nipper. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I could see all the faces kind of like going, oh, wow, yeah. And I went, right, on that note... How old do you think you're going to be when you're going to die now? Or how old do you want to be when you want to die now? And nearly every single one of them put about another 20 years on each, even if they were in the 70s. And so we added the figures up, and there was about 300 or 400 difference. And it's like, if just that group of people lived 300 or 400 years longer, how much better would the world be?
You know what?
What a fantastic...
The elite would hate it, wouldn't they?
I know, but the thing is, that's because they have affected your energy and your thinking.
We don't care what they want.
But I'm just saying,
we've got to build our own community.
We have to create our own. No, I get that, but that's the attack, isn't it? You know, their consciousness they affect you with, yeah.
Isn't it amazing how we all sort of come into, like you come into that book and everything, we all come in at different stages. And we say this with Drake, Michigan, like you get on the train and at the station and the platform where you're at. Because 15 years ago, my life, when I had a spiritual adventure, if you like, and my first books were like Louise Hay and Conversations with God and Neil Donald Walsh and this kind of thing. Now, in the last 6 months, suddenly now, I come across new material, new people, new teachings where suddenly you're learning now, if you go through all religious figures or beliefs, if you like, whether that's Hindu, whether that's Christ, all the rest of it, they all have the same story of 12 disciples rising up from the dead for 3 days, a mother and father, a baby born to... do you know what I mean? So now you're like, oh, what? Why have they all got this same story? And then suddenly you'll meet someone who said, like someone, and I was one of these guilty of, someone was talking about, say, flat earth, and we talked about this before, and your first initial is, don't be stupid, right, the world's around. But we've already just discovered you were brought up Catholic, And it's only because of events in your life where you thought, hold on, what if? What if I've not looked into something? Yeah. Now, as I'm doing a bit more research and meeting new people, once you go flat, it's hard to go back round, is what they say, because you could be, and then you look at your life and you think, right, who told you the world was round?
Of course.
Who told you everything?
But
right?
I learnt it was flat before I learnt it was round.
Now, again, that's more interesting. And there was that.
Because I'm of an age.
I know.
But it's interesting.
Now, the thing is, listen, so as I sit here now, I'm not saying it's one or the other.
No.
But what I am saying is,
ask the questions, though.
Ask the questions.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? And I just find...
Don't be frightened of asking questions, ever. And don't be frightened of being wrong. This is what I say to people. If you're wrong, so what? You've learned something.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
One of the hardest things is, and people will die for their beliefs. Because they hate the embarrassment of being wrong.
If you're enjoying everything that we're doing here at Drake, Michigan, please subscribe, ring my bell, and let's enjoy this journey together.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it's easier to argue and for that belief than say, I might have been a bit wrong here.
But I think that's a fabulously powerful thing to do, though, to go, do you know what, I think I might have been wrong.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because not only that,
powerful,
you give other people permission to be wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is so
And do you know
powerful.
what? Because I learned this as well, whether it's true, but this is just something to come across. So they reckon, like, the first, say, 7 years of your life, you go to school, and when the teacher asks a question, all the kids put their hand up and they want to answer it, and they're all laughing and joking, and they're not bothered if they're wrong. Right, they just want to interact, and then what happens is they get to a certain age where something clicks, where they stop putting their hand up because they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their friends of getting the question wrong. So something in the indoctrination of school knocks it out of you.
I was just going to say, don't get me on education.
Well, and it's fear. As a kid, when I was quite a shy kid, putting my hand up and being wrong in school,
so
I'd rather be like, I'll just not say anything.
And I remember my son, we went to something called the Big Green Gathering in Wiltshire years ago, and it was so dark because there's hardly any light pollution out there. It's fantastic. I remember this one night, we were all led on the top of this hill, just looking at the sky, and the kids were like, Mum, why is the sky so... I mean, as black as your tops, but with these tiny pinpricks of twinkling stars, and it was like... wow, why can we see so many stars? And I said, because there's no light pollution. So a couple of weeks later, my son's in school doing geography, and the teacher's asking about different types of pollution and everything, and everybody's putting their hands up. And my son went, and he was only about 11, 12, and he said, Sir, you forgot light pollution. And he went, don't be ridiculous.
And just put you down like that.
This is 30 years ago. And he went, and he come home and he went, Mum, he said, you said there were such a thing as light pollution. And I said, there is. And he went, well, my teacher said there isn't. And I went, did he really? So I said, right. So I got a couple of books out that had stuff in about light pollution. I went, look, there you go. I said, it's not just me.
Yeah.
There is proof. I said, and he's going to get a letter. So I sent a lovely letter to school, to the teacher and to the head teacher, and said, I think there's some need for extracurricular training because...
Good for you,
Karen.
Because... but he made all the class laugh at my son.
That's
and
it.
was
It's humiliating.
So he ain't going to put his hand up anymore, is he?
Exactly.
And he actually did not. And I think the sad thing is these days, so many children do know a lot more than the teachers do.
Oh, they do.
Because the teachers are taught what they learnt.
Yeah.
And you don't often get, well, we'll just give him an extra lesson on light pollution because that's a new thing.
I'll tell you a story. So when I was at Winstanley College, and I did all the web stuff and the film and everything else, but they needed some extra staff to do like personal tutoring. But with the personal tutoring, I had to go on a teaching course because I had to teach general studies. Wow. I had to teach trigonometry to a class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had no idea what I saw. I got a student to do it for me. I had no idea what it was doing. Not a clue. And that's in a college.
And that's what worries me as well, because, I mean, I think we all have this perception. Teachers today are just nowhere near like they used to be, right? And you can say what you want about old school, but it was more thorough, if you like. Now, the teachers, what they're teaching today, for a start, it doesn't even seem like it's the real material, or it doesn't feel like it's real evidence based. And so you've got sort of teachers who are coming through. For me, I wouldn't even class them as teachers.
We can go really down this route, can't we?
What
is a woman?
They're not. Well, they will not go down that route. Well, but teaching it's not teaching you to learn, to understand how to learn things, is it? To kind of go out there and research.
They don't teach you to be happy, though.
It's teaching you to repeat what they've said is
Of course it is. It's just to pass exams and to tick boxes, and they get funding.
And I mean, going back to the community stuff, lots of people would kind of say, well, if you're doing this, you've got to sit down and write a business plan, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that. And I used to be like, whoa, what, really? And I don't know if you remember, there was the Banker Dave. It was a documentary.
The Banker Dave, yeah.
Well, he said, and I just went, yes.
Yeah, he's good, that.
He said, I wrote my business plan on the back of a pack of cigarettes, and I thought, yes, he's my kind of guy. Yeah. Because why do you have to sit and do all this kind of stuff when actually, and especially when you're creative, you like to just go with the flow and do stuff. And
definitely.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have a kind of like a bit of a boundary and a bit of a plan, but not in the same way that everybody expects you to, because it kills the flow. And same with education, but with community stuff particularly, I've seen so many really passionate people who want to, set up a kind of road safety campaign, or set up child's been killed, or set up something, like a youth group or whatever, and they get a few people together and they go and have a meeting, and somebody from the council comes in and goes, yeah, but you do know that you're going to have to do risk assessments, don't you? And you know you're going to have to do this, and straight away they're kind of going, I don't know how to do any of that. And I mean, if I'm involved, I always say, ignore all that red tape, you can work around it. All you need to have is the passion. And that's kind of what I hope people take from today. If you've got the passion to kind of want to do something and to drive it forward, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, we were involved with the People's Health Alliance event recently, last year. And just kind of have an idea for what you want, get a few people together, chew it round for a bit. It does everybody else feel that this is okay? Then let us find people. When we set the food co-op up years ago, it was selling fresh fruit and veg. And that was on the back of the M65 protest, which was kind of why I talked about it, really. But we decided that there would be a sense of community in 6 months' time, a real sense of community, people supporting each other, caring for each other and all the rest of it. And yet on this estate where everybody lived, there wasn't that sense. And I'd only been there like 12 months, but some of these people had been there 20 years. And so they were like, we want to bring some of that back. So we toyed around with a few ideas. And co-ops seem to be a good idea, because the cooperative way of working is bringing people together. It's about education, it's about all sorts of stuff. So we looked at that, and then we were going to do a whole food co-op, because that's what we were eating, whole foods at the time. I don't know what happened there. And then we got so busy. No, we got so busy running a co-op, we were eating chips for our tea. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, that happens.
So it's crazy. Yeah. But we were planning this Whole Foods co-op, and then we did a bit of research, and we looked at some statistical research that had been done on the estate, and I think it's called the Black Report, which was a health report, a few other things. People weren't eating fresh fruit and veg. No. At the time, and it was shocking to all of us, because we were all eating a reasonably good diet at the time, and I'm getting a bit better. but we realised that what would be the point if the point was to bring people together, delivering a healthy diet? Nobody's going to come. Nobody's going to be interested. There'll be 5 of us sat around a table, but we're already sat around a table. What does that matter? We're doing it because we want people to come in. We want to grow community. We want to bring them together. We want people to support each other, care about each other, get a hug if they need it. Yeah. So we've got to meet them wherever they're at. So that's when we decided to do fresh fruit and veg. And actually it was fantastic, because and this was not to get political, but this was the Labour government with Tony Blair. And at the time there was a lot of poverty, which we're seeing now again. But people came because when there's going to be a general election, you'll see people crawl out of the woodwork left, right and centre. So lots of people came to visit Clayton Brook Food Co-op, and they were like, oh yeah, what can we do for a photo shoot? Oh yeah, we'll weigh your potatoes and all the rest of it. But they did get a proper ear blagging from us because we were telling them how it was. And one of the things that touched my heart so much, and it's probably even worse now, that there was women coming and saying their children weren't eating fruit and veg. Now, it's one thing to read that in a report. It's another to speak to a mother who you see on the street and go, oh my gosh, there really are these people. Do you know what I mean? That's hurting my heart. Kids not having fresh fruit and veg. And then they were saying, because we can now see that an apple's costing us 5p, whereas if you go to Asda, it's like £2 of apples or whatever. I don't know how much that is. How much is an apple? I can say, wow. And in them days, a packet of crisps, guys, was 35p. So 7 apples, 35p. That's an apple a day. My kid can have an apple a day instead of a packet of crisps. So they could see the difference. They could make the change. And then they were coming in and like learning how to do stuff. You know, some would be taking the orders, some would be weighing the food, some would be using the calculator. And if they didn't know how to do it, they were asking us to learn and stuff like that. So it had so many benefits. But on top of that, we shared those stories with the politicians. You know, one of them went on to be the Minister for Culture. I can't remember what his name was. Chris Smith, I think. And he's had quite a few high positions in government. But he was as shocked as I was when we shared that story about people not eating fresh fruit and veg. Do you know what one of the first things that government brought in? And I can't honestly say it was just Clayton Brook that did this, but talk about sowing the seeds.
Yeah, go on.
They brought in a policy that every child got a piece of fruit or veg a day.
Oh, wow.
Now, that could just be coincidence, guys, but I'd like to think we sort of definitely saw the
same
same thing.
Manifestation.
And so, you know, that was it. Every child, and you'd see big boxes of bananas or apples or whatever being taken into schools, and every child was getting a piece of fruit and veg.
And I think they've probably had cutbacks and don't do that anymore now.
I don't think they've cut back on all sorts, certainly like school meals and stuff. But yeah, so it's about getting people together. It's about having a passion for something and driving through the shit. Don't go, oh, this is too much red tape, I can't do this. There are people out there that can help you. And when we were setting up the food co-op, I'd never set up a food co-op. I set up a play group, set up a toddler group, set up a couple of other things, but not a food co-op. Didn't have a clue. Where am I going to go? And in those days, all we had was the Yellow Pages because we didn't have Google. So I go through the Yellow Pages looking up co-ops. And the first one I found was a funeral co-op. Yeah. So I thought, well, it's as good as any. I'll phone them up and say, do you know anybody that can help somebody setting up a food co-op? And that, obviously, it was divinely in intervention because she said, yeah, there's a place in Preston called the Lancashire Cooperative Development Agency. So I contact them, and yeah, they've got a development worker, he'll come out and have a meeting with us, blah, 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 blah. I'd been telling people on Clayton Brook for ages that there's money, you just put a funding bid in, you can get the money, don't worry about it. We'll worry about that later because how are we going to get a van, how are we going to pay for a room, how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that? Don't worry, there's money out there. And I kept telling them, wouldn't have it. And to be fair, I had moved from a different area to Clayton Brook and they didn't have as much, no reason to trust me, do you know what I mean? Gets this guy in from the co-op development agency and he starts spouting this shit and they're like, oh my God, did you hear him? He said we can get £20,000. And I'm like, I've been telling you that for months. 2 years later, we're at a conference to do with co-ops. Me and Dave is having this chat. He's the co-op development agency worker. And he said something. He said, do you know? I said, I hadn't got a clue how to set up a co-op. That's why we came to you. And he looked at me and he went, Karen, just between you and me, it was the first co-op I'd ever set up as well, food co-op wise. He said I'd supported cooperative businesses. You know, if a group of people wanted to come together and, like, one was a taxi company. The taxi company guy was selling out, so all the drivers decided to form a cooperative. And he went, but yours was the first food co-op. He said, so I learnt as much from you as you learnt from me.
Wow.
So, but just get out there, believe that it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, that's the right mindset.
Absolutely.
The attitude.
And we used to run like workshops and talks and stuff. And I remember one lady came up to me at one in Leyland, and she went, "Oh, I'm so glad I've seen you." And I said, "Why?" And, when you kind of look at someone and think, well, you're kind of vaguely familiar, but I don't know where I know you from. And she said, because we came to see you at a workshop at Preston Guild, she said, so many years ago. She said, and I came with a group of young lads, and they were called the inline skaters or something like that, and they were hoping to set up like a skate park thing. And she said, but the day before they decided to cancel on coming to the conference and everything. She said, and just to cancel everything because they were so dejected, and they was, you know, they were only like 14, 15-year-olds, and they were just so fed up that they said, no, we're just chucking towel in. We've had enough. Nobody's listening to us. Nobody's taking any notice. And she said, look, let's just go to this conference. She said, and we came to see you, she said, and they went out of that room absolutely buzzing on top note and said, go on, we'll give it one last shot. And she'd already got them signed up to go and talk to the parish council that night, but she told them that they might not be coming. And they went and they got the money. And she said, and I want to thank you, she said, because seriously, if we hadn't come to your workshop, she said, it would have just so flat. And I went, no, but you've got to give credit to them. I said, but, you know, sometimes you just need somebody to tell you, believe in yourselves and it is going to happen. And I used to say, don't give up till you're dead or unconscious.
And do you know what? They're so true. And also, because one of the things we do, and I don't know if you've read Napoleon Hill, and he talks about, you know, you're 6 foot away from gold. And just like he said, how close would them kids come into quitting?
Absolutely.
And it was, and that divine intervention, and you speaking that night, and so you've played your role.
Yeah, but
they had to trust and play it, and then
it all comes together.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing we teach.
And this is what we need to build new community. Do you know what I mean? It's because I still keep saying, my kids think I'm crazy, but I'll say, there's never been a better time to be alive. And they're like, really? And I'm like, absolutely, it's the most exciting
I think
time.
it is.
I can feel
the
it.
change is
Feel it in my bones, lad.
I do. Yeah.
Proper Norman.
But you've been shining the light, really, in Clayton Brook
for a long time.
So when was that, the 90s, 80s, 90s?
It started in the 90s, and kind of there was a bit of a situation happened, and I kind of took a bit of a step back for a while, but then I came back.
But the change in that area then, from my understanding, the people I've spoken to since moving into the area, is totally different now. So you've come in and probably not even realising that the light that you've been shining has actually changed that area.
It's funny because we was talking before, and I know because you've got a couple of books in you, haven't you? But and I was thinking, and I'm not just saying this because you know this, but I wonder if one of your books should be called Clayton. Right. No? But the thing is, for the last couple of weeks, like spiritually, I've just had that word coming to me.
Clayton?
Yeah.
Really?
And I don't know why, but then obviously you've come here today and you're on, and obviously I know you're from Clayton Brook, but like, so last couple of days I've said to Chris, look, I've had a few things, and I know what spirit's like. So even like, it's dead weird how it happened. So my missus was watching, do you know the old programme Dinner Ladies with
Victoria
Wood. Right, anyway, so she had it on, and I just happened to turn from my head on the computer just as the credits were going up on the screen, just as the name was coming past, and it said Clayton. Right. Wow. And then a few things, and I was in the other room the other day, and I had a headache, and I said to Chris, I said, I've got an headache, and I said, the only thing is, why I've got an headache, I feel like someone's trying to connect with me. And it was a really large gentleman, right? But a really large, like, you know, when you see him with the really big,
rotund.
And anyway, and the name Walsh come through with him, right? And I forgot what he did mention his first name as well and everything, and he was called, and I could feel the word, and he said to me Clayton. But it didn't feel like Clayton Brook. It felt more like he was saying like Clayton on Sea or Clayton something else. So that again, it come up, and then it's come up several times. So I know how spirit works sometimes. It's just I'm not,
because actually a lot of people say it shouldn't be called Clayton Brook because that isn't a proper name. It's Bambi Bridge, but the area is Clayton Le Woods, isn't it?
Clayton Le Woods.
Is that it is?
Yeah.
Clayton Le Woods.
So it's just interesting how it comes up, and but then when you mentioned your book and obviously your stories, and I could just see this book with the title.
Well, I was going to write a book about Clayton Brook Food Co-op years ago because it became an award-winning food co-op, and we had people come from all over the world to visit it because it was.
What a story.
Like a model. And we were helping other people. And whatever paperwork we had, I was going, take it, our order forms, our constitution. We were doing talks all over the place as well. It was really good.
But even after that, though, Karen, you haven't stopped actually looking out for other people, have you?
No, you've had a life of service,
I think it's written through the middle of me,
Yeah.
And actually, to be fair, I think some of the people who feel the most blessed, and this is probably we were talking about Diary of a CEO with Steve Bartlett before, but people who do offer service are the ones that feel the most blessed, I think. And you see that.
There's a lot in.
And it doesn't matter what it is.
Yes,
service
exactly.
can be doing IT, or as long as you feel like you're doing with good reason and good purpose,
right
and good
intentions.
Well,
intention.
this is why sometimes we'll have conversation as well, and like say you brand around the word success and failure. But people have to realise the context of what you mean by success. Because if you've brought a family up on your own with 3 kids, who's to say you are not... that is success.
There's a perfect poem, and it's called Success, by a lady called Bessie Anderson Stanley. It's wrongly attributed sometimes to Emerson. And it basically says about success, it could be a beautiful plant, it could be a garden, it could be a child, it could be a relationship, it could be anything, or it could be equally a successful business. But success, and the way she writes it, and I when I was running the community house, I used to give that to our volunteers as like a gift when we did a training session, because that is just so powerful to anybody who's kind of starting out, maybe, because we used to work with a lot of people who'd maybe been off sick, on long-term illness, whatever, and they needed to kind of get on that first rung and then the next rung. And so to read something about success that isn't saying you've got to be a high flyer, you've got to do this, just to be brewing up for somebody and making somebody's day, lightening the load, putting a smile on the face, anything, 100%. Giving them a hug.
It's so important. And also on the flip side of that, people associate failure in the wrong context as well. Because do you know what? Like if you're somebody who wants to start a business and then you started a business, so then you class that as success, then say the business failed, but then that's not failure because you did succeed. You tried. Failure is never trying. So, and this again, it always comes back down to the individual, and because it's the success is the mastery of the self, isn't it? So if you go and try something, it's success.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm glad you said it because it's fantastic.
It is.
So for anybody watching, go out there and try.
Absolutely.
Well, no, don't try.
Do. Yeah.
And Louise Hay, I mean, because do you know what? I used to, when I read my book, I always wanted to be with Hay House. Because I felt close to it because of Louise Hay and her books and her stories. I've changed my little mind a little bit as I've got, because they've got a bit more commercialised and everything, and then obviously she's passed and I don't know, but anyway, but when you associate all the spiritual stuff, you do think of Hay House. It's quite a big publishing company,
and when you think she was how old when she first created her first book?
I think
she published it, I think she was 51.
Was she that? I didn't realise she was that old.
When she published her first book, which was the
that's inspiring,
Little Blue Book.
Well, Louise Hay's story is amazing anyway, because she was like abused when she was younger. She ended up with I think cervical cancer or something like this. She went to the doctors, and she went, you're not operating, give me 6 months I think or something like this. She went away. She went and spoke with
Talk a Talk.
She went to Talk a Talk, and she healed herself from it, because she realised the energy of what had happened to her was playing its victim and it had come out. The story is amazing.
Louise Hay talks about metaphysics, so it's about creating, like equally, if you're stressed, you can create an ulcer in your body, because that's definitely, people relate to that quite easily, or you can get a migraine headache.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't necessarily go, well, I can create cancer in my body. Well, no, what you're saying, and that, for some people that is a dangerous step too far, and it is hard to kind of listen to that, but equally she's got this huge list of things, and it'll say this could be the thinking that created this disease, dis-ease in your body. So she'll say, try. So, and for example, I had 2 cysts on my eye, and one of them was the size of a garden pea, and I could, it was getting where my eye kept closing, and this is probably 15 years ago maybe, and then the other one, when the other one came, it was just a bit smaller, but they were doing this and it was felt gritty underneath my eye, but they were in my eyelid. Eventually went to the doctors, hate the doctors because I try and do stuff myself, but went to the doctors and he said, right, send you an appointment. I didn't know what I was going to. Ends up getting this appointment at the hospital. The consultant's sitting there. He's got a nurse next to him, and he's measuring and he's telling her to write it down how big it is and everything. Yeah, don't worry, we'll bring you in, slight incision. I went, incision? What? Hang on. I thought you were going to give me some tablets. And I might not have took them anyway. No, only joking. But I had to then go away and think, whoa, I didn't realise we were going down a surgery route here, because no, I thought there'd be some other way. So straight away, onto the Louise Hay book, reading through, looking at it. And in it says anything to do with your eye, because it was a cyst, but anything to do with your eye can be that you're not liking something that you're seeing, that you're looking at.
Right.
So you're like, you look up cyst, you look up eye, and then you kind of connect to.
Yeah.
So I then had to do some meditation with myself to go, so what is it? What is it that I'm seeing that I'm not liking? Let's unpick this. And quite often, and I could tell you exactly what it was a person. I can't change that person. I can't change that person's behaviour. It was somebody I was living with, so I couldn't really change that at the time either. But I can change the way I look at this situation. I can change the way I think about this situation. And one of the affirmations that she was suggesting was to just keep saying, I see all things with love and joy. I see all things with love and joy. And I said that as many times as I could say. Just whenever. I'd always say it minimum 3 times, because I think there's a power of 3.
3, yeah.
And I kid you not, I get my letter for the doctors for the hospital appointment 2 months later, and I go, oh, I forgot to have a look lately. Not a thing there. Amazing. Couldn't feel anything. And I was like, real proper, like, going like this, thinking, oh my, and I thought, shall I go to hospital and go, I've done it myself? And I thought, no, they'll never believe me, and they'll either come and get me with white coats or whatever. Yeah. So I did never go to the hospital, but I swear that's a true story.
100%, and I've come across other people, and I know from my own experiences, and I forget which order it happened, but years ago, I'd gone through that list, and also I'd fell down the stairs and broke. I'd broke the coccyx off my lower back, and I had a hernia on my lower spines, and I couldn't walk, and I was bent over, and anyway, I suffered with all this. Anyway, I remember reading the list, so I looked up, and it said lower back issues, and it was all connected with money. Right? But that was my life. Yeah. I was in such a bad place. The fear of not having enough and surviving and all this lot. And when I started doing my manifestation and law of attraction, one of the things I did was I changed my thought process of my money. And for years now, I had no back. Yeah. No back pain?
No.
Gone?
No back pain, plus money came into your life.
But I know, but then that's because I started doing this. I am healthy, I am wealthy. Yeah. And also, when I went through periods of, I was struggling, like, sort of, I don't want to say mental health, because I've never really been to the doctors and struggled with mental health, but I did have episodes in my life what I think I would class personally as I was struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
But I know Louise Hay and her affirmations really helped me through that as well, because I would purposely go to bed and say, my body is healing at every second. I am healing while I sleep. I am healing. I am healthy. I am. And do you know what?
Power of
I am. Power. Yeah. And you're bringing this affirmation, and people might throw it away.
Reprogramming.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I know the power in it. It's and then you start to see the miracles.
That's an interesting thing, because I am is in the Bible as well. The I am that I am, and be careful what you say. Be
careful what you say. The 2 most powerful words.
This is what they say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You look in the mirror and you say the wrong things. It doesn't feel good.
And not only that, I mean, again, talking about like enlightening and stuff like that. The number of times I'll hear people that will just say, like the other day, somebody said something about, well, I'd rather have this than not have my legs, lose my legs. I went, whoa, take that back from the universe and start a conversation, because people don't realise how...
The power.
How, my son was saying he didn't like his job, and then he ended up having a motorbike accident. Be careful. So, but again, that can start a very gentle conversation, just saying.
It's magic, isn't it?
Please be careful about what you're saying.
And it's funny you should say this, Karen, because Dean, who we had on the other week, my mate, so he decided, like, look, Kev, you know, he was saying his life was a mess, blah, blah, blah. He said, I'm going to start following. And I said, right, okay, I'll show you. But be careful, Dean. And I've said this before. Be careful when you start getting on the path, because sometimes your life can get worse before it gets better.
Well, it's clearance.
You have to have a clearance.
Yeah.
But Dean was like, no, I'm doing this, I'm following this, blah, blah. I want my life to change. And he kept like, I want my life to change. Next minute, he's dead.
No,
we're dead. Literally dead. They had to resuscitate him and bring him back to life.
Oh, this is the guy. Right.
Oh, his life's changed now. Yeah. Right now, you could say, but the thing is, I've met people who have said, I want my life to change. Next minute, relationship, marriage, broke up.
Of course, clearance.
And you're just
well, some people say, I hate my job, I don't want my job, and then they lose the job or they become redundant or whatever, don't they?
And then the thing is, you have people who
is listening.
All the time, yeah.
And you have people also that play the victimhood. So they say, they moan about the people they work with, they moan about the job, but the vibration, the feeling, they don't really. No. They're just saying it's lip service.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, absolutely. Even I need to work on that one because I'm still struggling with my hips, and so there is something there.
Oh, we'll have to get Louise Hayes listed.
Well, do you know what it says though?
What does it say about
feeling unsupported.
Right.
Interesting.
Which is interesting.
But the thing is as well, if you've had a life of service and always helping others, I was going to say, have you ever been helped?
Well, I do have to keep saying to the universe, I need, No,
because it's right.
It is.
Sometimes, because, and you know as well, and I don't know if you suffer, sometimes people who always help others have a very difficult time accepting. Right, they find it difficult.
I agree with that.
I did used to, and I remember I don't know if it was this year or last year. My car, I bought a new car, and then it kept going. Not new to me. Yeah. It kept going, breaking down and everything, and I was just like, oh, for goodness sake, I'd kind of asked the angels for this car to be the perfect car for me to do the things I need to do because I've got a mission in life. I've got to succeed, not succeed, complete. Yeah. And so then I was like, why is this not working? And every time I was having to put messages on Facebook, can anybody give me a lift? And because where I work, I can't get on a bus route. It's a long walk from the bus. But people were coming and helping me. And I was like, so blessed. And afterwards I was like, well, maybe that was what this car not working, because I've still got the same car. Yeah. Where maybe it was a lesson for me in accepting.
I think sometimes
accepting the help.
One of the big things we always say is, and part of manifestation is letting go. So, like when you've asked for something, it's not your job then to think how it's going to come about. No. You know what I mean? No. And sometimes we have to just put our hands out and say, I trust in you, God, or whatever, and just let it come to me. I accept it.
We're all at fault.
We're all good.
I mean, we know it works. Yeah. We know it works, but even now we'll still do it.
I know. It's like I remember somebody once using that as an analogy, saying, people pray and say, God, I need this, or God, I need that, or I need to win the lottery, and then somebody whispers, well, it's about time you bought a lottery ticket, or you say, I want somebody to do this, do that, the other. You wouldn't say to your dad, will you fix my bike, and then take it back off him. Because he ain't never going to get it fixed then, is he? If you keep taking it back off him, you've got to leave it there. You've got to say, yeah, Dad, fix my bike. Yeah. There's the puncture repair kit, whatever you need, or you know what I mean? And then walk away until it's done. And then you get your bike back.
I remember saying to someone not so long back, we did I think a Motivation Monday or something like that. And we were saying, look, just to explain law of attraction, like ordering Amazon, right? You've put, what you want, you've put the order in, but then you don't think about it now until it gets delivered a few days later. Yeah. Do that.
Yeah.
Do that and watch how it comes.
I know.
But you're learning all the time, because I learned something as well. So obviously when say someone's someone's ill or and then what you do is you pray, but then you have to look at what you're doing, because that is give it a fear. Because you're saying, please don't let them die. So then there's different energies that in there.
But not only that, you could be asking for them to be healed immediately, and that might not be their last.
That might be exactly.
Because I remember, I can say this story now because I've told my son recently. Years ago, my son wanted to join the army, and it wasn't what I wanted for him at all. No. It was around the time of the Iraq war and everything, and off he went for his training 2 weeks. And I'm like, I want to pray about this, but I don't know what to pray, because I don't want to say, please don't let him join the army, because that's not my place to say that. No. I don't want to ask for something to happen so that he doesn't. So in the end and I was really conscious of my words and how am I going to pray this prayer, and how am I going to make things right in the best possible way. So in the end up, the words I chose were, I pray that the best outcome for all is what happens. And I just prayed that prayer, and it kind of slightly different words. And off he went, and he did his training, and it was breaking my heart, but I couldn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, didn't let on to him that I didn't want him to. And he did loads of training, running around the estate with backpack on with loads of weights in and everything. But then he goes and does 2 weeks in Scotland. Came back, and I've never heard such racist drivel in my life, but that's another story. Because you can't teach people to kill people if you think they're nice. You've got to teach them that they're horrible. And then he had to have a medical. And his medical came back to say that he had something wrong with his eye and he wouldn't be allowed to be in the army. So he was devastated, and he was, it was totally floored him, but it meant he could still do whatever else he wanted to. And it was only the smallest of things. I can't remember what it was, something to do with retina. And if he had a bang, it could make a detached retina or something like that. There's a specific name for it, but I'd never heard of it before, and neither had he, and didn't realise there was anything wrong with his eyes, and neither did he. And but I told him that recently, and I was like, I said, well, I didn't want to ask for you not to go in the army because that's not my place to, but I said, so this was what I prayed.
A divine intervention.
But afterwards, it's thank you, Dad.
The best outcome. Then you still have to deal with the outfall, don't you? Because he was upset and he was gutted, and he thought his life was going to go on a different path, and it didn't.
And we see it all the time. I mean, I've got friends, and my friend Sean, who's been on the podcast before, and he looked at his life, and like he's 50 now, and like he feels like he's just found love for the very first time. He's had failed marriages and he's had children, and everything happened through. And when you're going through it, so like when his wife would have left and all the rest of it, he couldn't see any way forward. He thought, to be honest, he wanted to kill himself. He couldn't. And I remember having these conversations where I said, look, you're going to look back, and you'll realise. And now he phones me up and he said, Kev, I never knew love was like this. I've never been so happy in my life.
That's nice.
And you know what I mean? And so again, but
it's all for me then.
But this is what they're saying, don't they? I mean, everything has to happen.
But I remember being that low before I left my husband and was sat with a knife at my wrist, and that was when I kind of knew I need to do something about this, because this is no way to live. No, absolutely. No. And especially having 3 kids, because I was thinking, well, if I die, what's the repercussions for them? If I leave, because my other option was to leave completely and go and live somewhere else, and then I was thinking, well, how would I be able to pop back and just see that the kids were all right? Because I didn't want to be in and out of the life, because that messes people up sometimes as well. And it just was really, really weird time, but thankfully I did kind of get out.
Well, from all that, you've managed to make so many differences to different people's lives on that journey, and you've not stopped either, have you? That's the thing.
I know, and not only that, even my kids, because they haven't followed the same path I have, but they still do things, and I'll look and think, oh, there was a seed sown there, or they'll say things, or they'll kind of research stuff, and they'll come to me and say, Mum, have you read this or have you read that? And I'll go, oh yeah, about 20 years ago, I think I did tell you, you know what I mean? And they'll go, oh right, yeah. But everybody has to come to stuff in their own time as well. And we were talking about that before, weren't we? That, I can remember people looking at David Icke stuff and absolutely feeling ill because you get so absorbed by it all that you can't take it all in. And so sometimes it has to be a drip feed. And even when I worked at Serigen, we used to have this saying that, you might sow the seed, somebody else might water it, somebody else might put a ray of sunshine on it, but eventually it will blossom. And who knows which person played the biggest role? It doesn't matter.
And do you know what, Karen? And I've said this before, so like years ago, she's passed over now, but Lillian O'Neill, who I give a lot of credit to in my healing journey, and I remember going to see her once, and we were just chatting, and she just said to me, she says, Kevin, and she said, I know you can't see it, she said, but you're like a dandelion. She said, so what's been happening is, she said, all these seeds are being spread out far and wide. She says, and you can't see what's happening, but they're growing. She says, and in years to come, she said, people are going to come back, and because they've all growed.
Yeah.
And I always think of that and that analogy, and it is because sometimes you'll never ever meet the person's life
absolutely.
who you've touched, and you would have touched people's lives.
Well, look at them the skiing line skaters. Never met a single one of them personally because they came to see the talk, but they would have just been in the audience. It was only the lady that came back to tell me the story, and many a time I'll drive past Earby and I go, I wonder what they're doing now. Do you know what I mean? Because you just don't know.
And do you know what? That reminds me, because before you mentioned you were fortunate enough to speak to the wonderful Wayne Dyer, Dr.
I did
Wayne
on
Dyer.
the phone.
So you'll have to tell us that. But and you'll probably know this as well. So in one of his seminars when he was younger, I think he might have even had a bit of a hair, but I don't know.
Just a bit.
And I don't want to do it to disservice, but I'll just give you the gist. So basically, it talks about how this young boy who must have come from like a broken home, or he had a lot of stuff on. And he come in, and the teachers were teaching, basically dismissing him as he's a naughty boy and all the rest of it. And this one teacher, like, she just said, "Oh, go on, get out the class," or blah, blah, blah. And then she found out what had been happening at home, whether he'd been abused or this kind of stuff. And she sort of took him under his wing, and they become very, very close, right? Like almost, I think she might have even ended up like more or less like adopting him, what it was called. And years later, she went to watch him graduate. It upsets me because I've watched it. So what's it called? She went to watch him graduate, and he becomes a really well-known doctor or something else like that. And he comes over and he says to her, like more or less calls her mom, and said, "Mom, if it were for you teaching me, this is how I've turned out." But then she starts crying and she said, "No, you're wrong." She said, "You taught me how to teach."
Oh, wow.
And it was like, it's so profound. Yeah. And it was like, and you don't know what roles you're playing in people's lives.
That's true.
Sounds like a chicken soup for the soul story.
Oh, it's so
Jack
beautiful.
Do you read those books?
Yeah, I mean, there's another one,
Jack
Canfield, is it? And Chicken Soup. These amazing stories. The Alchemist, that's another one. Yeah. But so, we said on the website, we're going to put a list of these books, because these are books that you have to read. Yeah, and there's certain films, there's like The Conversation with God's a good film if you've ever seen it. And there's The Celestine Prophecies, that's a very good film. The book's good. Journey of a Spiritual Warrior, I think it is, as well. That's Dan Millman. He was a gymnast, and he broke his leg, and he came across some kind of like martial arts guru type of person who could jump from there to the top of a garage.
Oh, wow.
And he was like in his 70s or something, 60s or 70s. So he took him under his wing, and because he'd been told after breaking his leg he'd never do gymnastics again, and he was a world-class gymnast. And this guy gets him fit and gets him back to doing it. So there's a book, in fact there's 2 books, but it's based on a true story. And then there's a film, which is amazing. Oh,
well, we're going to have to get this list, because even like modern day, like films like Inception, and the one with Matthew McConaughey, when Interstellar. There's some really profound ones. Yeah. But let's go back. So when you phoned, how did a phone call with Dr. Wayne, great Dr. Wayne?
It was and again, talk about synchronicities, because me and my partner used to, I was saying before, we used to talk about all sorts of stuff till 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. We were sat up one night chatting, and he used to always have the television on in the background just for a bit of noise. And it was QVC of all things. And we would have never sat and watched that. It just wasn't our bag at all. But it comes on, and underneath it's saying, "We'll soon be having Wayne Dyer on blah, blah, blah." And we were like, "Whoa, what did that just say?" So we put the volume up, because I don't think it was even on noise. Put the volume up. And she's saying, "Yeah, Wayne Dyer's got a new box set of books or something, or CDs or whatever, and he's going to be on shortly, and whatever time," she said. So he's like, and they're saying, "And phone this number, you can phone in and speak to him." So my partner was absolutely buzzing, and in them days he only had one of them phones that you had to top up. Yeah. So he's crazily trying to top up his phone to make sure he's got enough money on to phone him, and so eventually it comes and he phones, and then they say, "Right, stay on the line," and all this lot. And then he goes, "You speak to him." And I went, "No, I'm not speaking to him." So I didn't actually speak to him, but we was having this conversation in the room, and he was on the telly, and we could hear it. So Gary's chatting away to him, and he says, he said, "I need to tell you first," he said, "that my partner always called you Wayne Baby." Because every time I saw him, I used to go, "Oh, there's Wayne Baby." And Wayne went, "And why is that then?" And he stroked his bald head and said, "Is that because I haven't got any hair and I resemble a baby's bottom. And he was like, oh my gosh. But the other thing that came out of that as well was, because my partner had got a diagnosis of bipolar, he was saying, and I've got bipolar, blah, blah, blah. And Wayne just stopped him in his tracks and said, can I just stop you there, my friend? Which, to hear Wayne Dyer call somebody in the room my friend, was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
And he said, do not label yourself. He said, you are not your label. He said, you are you. And he never, well, I mean, I haven't seen him for a while because we're separated, but for years he never called himself bipolar again.
Fantastic.
Wayne has changed his mindset in an instant.
Yeah.
And sometimes the seed sowing is that
It
quick,
is.
isn't
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't realise what
You can be
But
inspired.
what a lovely guy he was, because he was just, to have that kind of one-to-one in a living room, and him just kind of sat like this, in the studio and just chatting ordinarily,
Oh, wow.
Because
when you see videos of him now, you just think he was belting, wasn't he?
And he'd had a tough life.
Yeah,
his dad was abusive. He left him
right.
when he was little, and he had lots of kind of trauma to deal with to come through that and make peace with it.
I think he went off and did all the teachings, like with the monks and everything, and brought all them teachings back.
Yeah, because he did the Tao, didn't he?
Yeah,
he did the Tao Te Ching for a year and stuff.
There, like we've mentioned Louise A and Wayne Dyer, but I think you probably put Bob Proctor, Jim Rowan,
but
Tony
Susan
Rowan.
Jeffers with the Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway was another good one.
And Jack Canfield with So we have got, I mean, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say, don't we? And everybody's playing their role.
Yeah,
everybody is. So what's your plans for the future?
Well, I've got a few things. Like, obviously, you've just said about the books. So I've got a book a few books. One of them was Eco Earth Mother, The Diary of a Road Protester. And I think it's 35 years next year or something like that. So that would be a good time to get it done. But another one is Victim to Victorious, because I've had lots of things in my life that are a bit traumatic, but I don't like to focus on the victim story, because I think that's not, everybody's got their own victim story, but it's to focus on the how did you get through it, what did you do, and quite often it was using service to others, and I think when you look back on your life, because I did something called Radical Forgiveness as well a few years ago, did some training in it, and with Radical Forgiveness it teaches you that actually there is nothing to forgive, because if it was all part of life's plan, and it was the stuff you needed to learn to get you on that, whatever it was you came here to learn or whatever, then at some point you end up thanking those people that have given you those awful situations. Now, I know for some people that'll be really, really hard to kind of grasp.
But can I just jump in there, and it was very deep. We had an interview with Linda Scott, didn't we?
Yeah.
And she had some horrendous things happen to her, raped and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. But she said she thanks them.
Yeah.
And like that's a lot for people to take.
I know.
But it's like you said. But I needed these lessons. My soul.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can say that because that was my journey, and I can say to people, I'm not expecting you to understand. I'm not expecting you to kind of feel that you need to forgive people, because not everybody's ready for it. And even my forgiveness journey was, I started off by forgiving the person. Initially, because I knew it was hurting me too much to not do. Yeah. Because if you're not in that forgiveness, you're just angry all the time, and if I saw a talk on the television about rape or whatever, and I'd be debilitated, and and it'd make me feel ill, and I'd maybe not sleep, and all the rest of it. So my initial start of the forgiveness was to kind of release some of that for me, not for them, not at all for them. But when I did the radical forgiveness, you kind of work through a worksheet, and there's 5 stages of radical forgiveness, and one of them is having your story validated. But then you reframe it, and you do, you kind of work through it, but you have to physically verbalise it, because there's an energy in the words, and you kind of work through that, and the energy shifts. And at the end of me doing a worksheet on being raped, I ended up kind of saying thank you, literally saying thank you, and tears of joy. And I know this sounds completely insane, but literally tears of joy and gratitude to that person, thinking, well, if you came as my soul family to teach me this lesson, because I'd asked to learn it beforehand, thank you so much, because what a task.
I know.
For somebody to be put in that situation. And and obviously not everybody will look at it like that.
It's difficult.
But it was a journey I went on, and I felt like I needed to go on it. And the energy collapses around lots of situations linked to that kind of abuse. And you know, when you look at things on an energetic level, it's phenomenal. It really is phenomenal, and you can't measure it. You know you can feel it, but you can't actually physically. And one day I'm sure they will be able to physically measure it. But yeah.
Can I just ask bringing as well? So like back in the day when I used to do like all the mediumship and the readings and everything else, and I remember having a lady come to see me, and a load of like stuff come out, and she'd been sort of like raped and abused and horrible things. Anyway, the reading went where the abuser, who was now in spirit, come through, right? And straight away she was like, I don't want to speak, blah blah blah, right? But then, it wouldn't leave, and I had to try and work out the message that it was got, and the message was, she needs to cut the cord, she needs to let me go, because she's holding me here, and it wasn't about that person moving on. He said she can't move on. She needs to let it go because I'm holding her life back. I'm holding everything back. And we had this conversation. I said, look, and people have to understand. So like when you get in a mediumship reading, and everything, it comes through very visualistic and it's energy. So obviously, spirit is trying to explain things to me. So when this spirit of this person come through, it come like he was in like a ring of fire. And what he was saying is, I can't come past. And he was showing me like this thread, even though he was in a different realm. He was saying she can't move on until she cuts it and lets it go. And I remember talking her through this exercise and said, look, when you go home, now whether she did it, I don't know. Maybe she did. And I said, but you need to go through these things of just releasing it, not for that person. No one's saying you have to forgive that person. No. You need to let yourself. To move on,
and it is
and so their messages are there from spirit as well.
It's a very powerful message, though.
But not only that, I think you probably find as well anybody that's like lost someone. I mean, if we were saying earlier, my stepson committed suicide when he was 17. Now that could have totally freaked my life. It could have totally made me depressed, but thankfully, because of the spiritual stuff that I'd gone through and the stuff that I knew, and even my partner, we kind of worked through it together, and we're able to see, I won't say the beauty in that situation, because you know what I mean, but we could see that everything happens for a reason, that had he not been meant to do that, then it would have, somebody would have found him, he would have been brought back. Any number of scenarios could have played out. But if you can look at things like that, and some people might say, what do they call it, a spiritual bypass or whatever, don't they? But actually, it makes a lot of sense to be able to look at things in a completely different light, in a different perspective. And the same with anybody that dies that's, unexpected or a traumatic death or whatever. If you stay in that place, your life isn't going to move forward, and you are going to be kept in a ring of fire, 100%. If you want to call it. So as soon as you can start releasing that, whichever way, there's different ways, aren't there? You can do it with, kind of Reiki sessions or energy work or hypnotherapy, or any number of different ways, but to be able to release you from that pain, because
and I think
that's not what anybody came here for.
And what my interpretation, where I always took from, and I was yet to meet a spirit who was, people who were living seemed to be worried about the spirit, but my perception was, I always got the spirit was more worried about like you here. They're not bothered. They understand it from a whole different angle, and also they have no concept of time.
No.
There's no time. Like 100 years here is like a second there. There's nothing. So like you're here in this pain and suffering, and you don't need to be. Spirit are literally saying, absolutely. Look, move on. It's fine. You're gonna understand after, and you're gonna say, why did I waste 50 years of my life?
And the interesting thing is, everything is in divine order, isn't it? Whether you choose to accept that or not. And I might not have been ready to hear that X number of years ago, especially when I was going through a traumatic divorce type situation. But when you look back, you can go, oh my gosh. And you can't say all things happen for a reason about the good stuff.
Exactly.
And ignore the other stuff.
That's
as
right.
well. There is no good stuff or bad stuff either.
The power in your story, so this is why it's important to write your books, because the thing is, I don't believe you should sort of bypass the pain and the grief either. But what you do is you don't have to live in it for 10 years.
Absolutely.
No.
Right. So, but there's strength in hearing from people who have come through it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And knowing there's another life after.
Absolutely.
So if you can have in 2 years of pain, say, instead of 10.
Yeah.
That's massive
because
in
it is
itself.
a process, and
agree.
grieving is a process,
it is,
isn't it? You know, and with all of those things, whether it's rape or death or whatever, there is a process that you need to go through. And I don't think, and whether that's what people would say is a spiritual bypass, but I think some people think just being happy can be a spiritual bypass. But, you know, I think you've got to deal with it in your own way at the time. And if you can find other people, it's a bit like we're setting up the food co-op, isn't it? If you can find other people that have done something that might be able to help you get through the red tape, help you get through the bureaucracy, or help you get through the pain and get through the story, then find somebody. Don't just do it on your own. You know what I mean? Why?
And do you not find as well, like one of the biggest things to get through the pain sometimes is it comes back to giving service to others. Because when you feel like you're bringing some kind of comfort or happiness, in a way it's healing you at the same time.
I think it's building your soul up a bit there, you know.
You're helping them, but in turn they're helping you.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you know, you want to feel that you're alive again, that you're and you know, and you want
your light's getting brighter.
no, that's true.
I must admit that when Andrew died, somebody took me under the wing and was kind of being very nurturing with me, but had said, how about we set up some kind of support group for young people, which would have seemed like the right thing to do at the time. However, I realised pretty early on that there were lots of ways that I could support young people just by being there or listening or whatever, and letting them know that I was there, then throwing myself into something. Because often you can throw yourself into something and then before you know it, you go, oh my gosh, this has completely taken over my life. How do I get out of this now? So sometimes you have to have the strength to be able to say, actually, it's a lovely idea, but it's not for me right now. And if you want to do it, I'll kind of give you a bit of guidance, but I'm not going to take this on, because you can get totally sucked into doing something, and then you know you're still needing to kind of have support for that, aren't you, afterwards? So, but I do think giving service is a really good way, but give service to yourself first.
A lot of us forget that. You know, because with the kind of people that do give and give, you do forget yourself, and it is important to...
Absolutely. I mean, getting back to the money situation before, and the support you do need to be able to, you know, like, I've got a project at the minute, but I still need to be able to pay my bills, and the project that I'm doing is taking a lot of my time, which I'm absolutely loving 100%, but I also have to kind of have something coming in.
Balance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And because we live in this reality, this world, we have to understand that. Because again, when you get people who say, "Oh no, money's evil," no, well, hold on, money's energy, and we need that energy.
Money is neither good or evil.
It's the way you use it.
I was teaching. I had my son and his daughter. My son and his girlfriend had come in the other night. I don't know, it was about 11,
Cool,
12
you've put
o'clock.
something out at universe there, lad, haven't you?
We'll stop
Anyway, so they'd come in, and we were talking. We were chatting about I don't know, whatever. And I said to him, I said, right, look, if on this table now, if I put like some cocaine and some weed and some chocolate and and a whole mixture of things, and then you'd be like, oh no, I'm not having that, and oh, that's disgusting, and you know, but certain people will be drawn to that.
To one particular.
Anyway, so then I said, what about if I put this on, right? And it was like 20 grand. And he went, oh, I'll have that. And I said, but do you see that feeling? It's exactly the same, right? It's got you. And it's just another drug, right? I said, and you have to separate that. Yeah. Oh, wow! Like that importance and that attachment to the money. That is no different than the importance attachments to the drug, to the weed, to the food. Yeah. It's exactly the same. You need to become detached from everything.
Yeah, it's true.
It plays its role.
And I think something interesting that I've noticed over the last probably 20 years, and we were talking about sowing seeds and stuff. A lot of people, if you say to them and pin them down and say, right, if you did win the lottery, if you won a lot of money, what would you actually do with it? You know, and some will say, buy a house, do this, do that, do whatever. But if it was about doing something, you know, a lot of people, especially these days, want to set up a community or want to set up a, you know, a food growing thing or whatever, and obviously to help other people. But and they'll go, oh yeah, that's what I want. If I won a lot of money, and I go, but why wait? Exactly. Why wait till you've got a lot of money? Just get a few people together now. Start doing it. Start focusing on it, and it's a bit like the build it and they will come.
Yeah, the universe will if you're on your path, the universe will start.
Everything will align.
People get it all confused in this way, where you know, it's a longer conversation. You have to break it because people think, oh, once I get the money, I'll look after my health. Once I get the money, I'll look after my happiness. No. You need to do it the other way, and then this is the miracle. When you do it the other way, then the money comes.
Absolutely. But also, when you're talking about setting up projects, I've met so many amazing people who have just had an idea and they've got nothing, no money, nothing, but they've got the passion, and then they go out there and they start sowing the seed, and before you know it, somebody's offered them a piece of land, or somebody's offered them a trailer or a truck, or you know what I mean.
Miracles happen.
People. Someone's rubbish is another man's gold, isn't it?
I was talking to JB, a friend of ours. JB came to mine the other day, and he's been doing he's been into cryptocurrency and blockchain and stuff for a couple of years, and he's got by with it all, and he's been having his adventures and stuff like that. And recently at the Crown, he met his new partner, and they had a baby recently. And he's always wanted to travel the world. He's quite nomadic in that life. You know, he's been living in a van before he met, you know. But then he was like, I want to travel the world. And the baby's only a few weeks old. But then he met someone. This is the thing, he doesn't even know this person that well. He met this person on a train or something, got talking, they got along really well. And she said, well, I'm buying property in this country, and this country. I've got a place in Bulgaria right now. It needs a load of work doing. Do you want to go and move there? Yesterday, off they went.
Wow,
off they went.
Just the university did it. And even what's good to was it last week we had Mark Holly on, who has obviously worked ITV, Sky, had his own series and all this lot. Yeah. And we're here just chatting and everything else. And he went, have you got a building company? I went, yeah. And he went, I know why I'm here now. He said, listen, I've got a few little jobs that need doing around the house. He said, you do that for me. He said, and I'll do a series for you, and I'll do all the... And he just said, and he said, that'll be a fair exchange. Yeah. And I went,
happy days.
I know, and that is happening a lot more these days.
It is happening a lot more, the energy exchange.
Bartering and stuff.
Mm-hmm. But it is difficult, because, I mean, we've seen friends and that as well. It's like, they're trying to do the best, and then because they're not seeing any rewards, then they get frustrated. But also then you have to say, but are you doing it for the wrong reason? Yeah. You know what I mean? So just do what you love, and it'll come. You know what I mean?
And let go.
And we get frustrated.
We do. We're terrible for it. We're terrible for it. Us for looking at numbers. Just numbers on the screen, just looking at the figures that we've got. We're terrible for it. We're really bad. But then it puts them down.
And on that note, just make sure you like and share.
Subscribe.
If you're enjoying these things at Drake, Michigan, ring the bell. No, but the flip side of that is, because we've always said this, we want the channel to grow organically. Because what's the point of having 10,000 if only 300 of them watch your stuff? So I'd rather just have the right numbers.
And again, going back to the Steve Bartlett stuff with the CEO, Diary of a CEO, he really did start off organically and very kind of, a bit of an arm's length camera, and now it's phenomenal. And he's got a team of 30 staff, I think, something like that. And
see, again, you're probably about, I don't know, the 5th or 6th guest we've had on recently, and every time you come, literally a couple of days before, something will happen, and because I said to you before, I've never heard of Sean Bartlett or whatever, and then literally Steve Bartlett, sorry, but 2 or 3 days ago, I just happened to click on something. It comes on. He's on my telly. I'm watching it. Then you've come in today, and we said the same thing. It's just happening all the time. It's almost like as if you're on the right track.
Synchronicities,
Do you know what I mean? So I think we just have to keep going. Don't we?
Absolutely. No, we're not. You don't think you do? Yes,
no,
you do.
You just do. Yeah, you just do, and. As you do. As you do. And I know you will anyway.
Come hell or
I'm lucky to have such a great neighbour, an inspiring, amazing neighbour.
You've done very fortunate.
I know,
Even got some paint out of it, didn't you?
I got some paint out of it as well.
No, because what's called? What's called? I know, because obviously you had the pub at the Crown and everything.
And I never met him then. No,
you never met him.
I met him because he was advertising about the...
The Reiki. And the wands.
The wand.
Yeah.
But then, but because of that connection, what would have been a few years ago now, wouldn't it?
Well, I think I met Karen about a year
in the
ago.
Last 12 months, yeah.
Oh, so you met Karen, but then through Karen, then you must have met Dave.
Oh, I knew Dave years ago.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
But because you knew Dave, you then told Ant.
I sent Ant a big long list of people
and Dave has come on the show
with
Elise.
and then with his partner who was Elise, and then that's just opened up doors,
which has brought Mark Ollie on.
Which has brought Mark Ollie. So everybody's connected.
Absolutely.
And it's obviously all for you.
And look at,
well, so yeah, the check's in the post.
Maybe it's a mitochondrial leave. I was reading about that the other day.
Right. Oh, what's that? Go on, tell me.
No, because they've done some research on DNA from thousands of people around the world, and I don't know when it was done, because I first heard about this about 20 years ago, about a thing called the mitochondria, and if you look at everybody's mitochondria, it all goes back to one person who was Eve. So we've all got the same DNA strands of this mitochondria. But it came up again yesterday on YouTube, and it was saying about this research and how from all those different, obviously because they researched with the DNA stuff, but they've all got the same mitochondrial DNA as the first female, which was Eve. Everybody around the world. So it's saying, so for those people who say we are all one, we are.
We really are all one, aren't we?
What a lovely thing to end on as well. So thank you for coming in, Karen.
You're welcome, thank you.
That's
I'll be back.
Yeah, definitely, because obviously what we find is we've talked about one area, but we could do all this again in a completely different area.
Definitely.
So you're going to have to be a regular guest.
Yeah, you must come on and tell us about your project as that goes forward.
I will, and my books. And
if anything, we can help you there as well, by the way, because depending on what recruit, because back in the day I couldn't afford to the publishing thing.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting involved with the Amazon self-publishing.
Right, yeah.
But the thing is today, so like you've got, obviously, I know some people are not for it, but you've got the ability with chat and AI, right, which is fantastic. You've got all this technology now where you can talk your book and it writes it all.
Yeah.
Then Amazon self-publishing does it all for you, right, with a little bit of tweaking with someone who's good on the computer. It's so easy.
It's phenomenal.
So even if it's just a case of getting your book and story out there, do you know what I mean? And then once it's done, because we've done it, haven't we? And to be honest, what they do say is as well, I think it's like 98% of books that are in, Waterstones or something, literally sold less than 100 copies.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
People have got this perception of what's going on.
They're all bestsellers.
So all your best books are going to be sold in like your Mind, Body and Spirit fairs, this kind of stuff. So if you write the book, you self-publish it, once you've got the book, and then every time you know someone, they say, hey, take a pile of them for me.
Absolutely.
Take a pile. That's the way to do it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Just for anybody that's watching, I don't know if you put anything underneath your podcast or whatever, but I am, if anybody wants to set up a group and needs a bit of support, guidance or whatever, just to plough through that red tape, give me a shout.
Or just pass the details that you prefer to be contacted on, and we'll put that in the description.
It's always good to just have somebody.
Of course it is, because these are big projects to tackle.
Even if like obviously like on Facebook we have the Facebook community, but that's a good place just to start them conversations where other people can reach out to others and say, can you help me? Fantastic. Do you know what I mean? And so social media, it does play its role in a good way as well.
Of course
it brings people who can be lonely together. You know what I mean?
Everything can be good. With the right intention.
Or it's neither good nor bad.
Neither good nor bad. Yeah.
Lovely.
Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks for your time, Karen. That's been lovely.
Thank you.